Victoria's parents offered to pay for my entire college if I left her, promising she'd get her trust fund early if she dumped me herself. When I looked at her, she tore the papers to confetti and said, "I'm not for sale." I stayed silent. That was 9 months ago. Last week, her father was arrested for tax evasion. Victoria cornered me after bio and slid $500 across the lab table. "I need you to be my boyfriend for 3 weeks," she whispered. I didn't even know why she was talking to me. Victoria drove a white Mercedes to school. I took the bus. When she saw how confused I was, she finally explained. "My 18th birthday is in 8 months. That's when I'll get access to my trust fund." She leaned in closer. "But I want it now, and if I'm dating someone inappropriate, then they'll probably offer me some deal to dump you. They always think cash fixes everything." She said it like a joke, like her parents trying to buy her off was funny. "So you in?" I stared at the money. $500. That's 2 months of groceries. "When do I start?" She smiled, different from her usual popular girl smile. "Tomorrow. I'll pick you up at 7 for dinner at my house." Then she walked out, leaving me with 5 bills and no idea what I'd just agreed to. First time at her house, I thought I was being pranked. The driveway went on forever. They had a fountain with actual koi fish. I counted 6 cars, all different brands. Her parents were in the formal living room. "Mom, Dad, this is Dakota." Her mom's smile died. Her dad's eyebrows went up, way up. "My boyfriend," Victoria added, grabbing my hand. Her palm was sweaty. "Yo." Her dad cleared his throat. "And what do your parents do, Dakota?" Straight to the job question. "My mom's a nurse," I said. Didn't mention the second job cleaning offices. Didn't mention my dad hadn't been around since I was 10. Her mom's smile got tighter. "How nice." After that disaster, Victoria set up our routine. Pick me up every morning, hand-holding between classes. "We need to be seen together," she said. "Make it believable." She even made me an Instagram so she could tag me and stuff. But something shifted the second week. She started doing this thing where she'd play with my fingers while we talked, probably for show, but it felt real. We went to this party at her friend's house. Mansion, obviously. Pool the size of a lake. She stayed by my side all night, introduced me to everyone, proudly. "This is Dakota," she'd say, like I was someone special, not just the hired help. When some douchebag made a comment about me shopping at Target, she shut him down hard. "At least Dakota works for his money," she said. "What do you do besides spend daddy's cash?" The guy had nothing to say. That's when her phone buzzed. "My parents saw us this morning," she whispered, showing me the text. "They're furious." Her soft hand grabbed mine. "Let's go somewhere quieter." We ended up on this balcony overlooking the city. Lights everywhere, like stars, but on the ground. She was wearing this dress. Blue, simple, probably cost more than my mom's rent, but she made it look easy, normal. 3 months till my birthday," she said. "Random." She turned to me, close, really close. "Dakota, I need to tell you something." My heart did this weird skip thing. This was it. She was gonna say this was more than just fake, that somewhere in all the pretending, it became real, like it had for me. "What?" I asked. She bit her lip, looked away, then back. "My parents want to meet with us tomorrow, both of us." "Oh, they said they have a proposal about my trust fund." I bit my tongue so hard it tasted like copper. The meeting was at their house, formal dining room this time. Felt like a court hearing. Her parents sat on one side, us on the other. Papers between us. Actual printed papers. "Dakota," her dad started. "You seem like a practical young man." I nodded, throat dry. "We'd like to make you an offer," her mom added, smiling, fake smiling. Victoria grabbed my hand under the table, squeezed, hard. "We understand you need money for college," her dad continued. "We're prepared to pay for your entire education. Any school, any degree." My brain stopped. Any school? That was hundreds of thousands more money than I'd ever seen before. "In exchange," her mom said, still smiling, "you end this relationship today, right now. No contact after." I looked at Victoria. She was staring at the table. "That's not," and her dad interrupted. "Victoria can access her trust fund early, today, if she ends this herself." The room went silent. Victoria's hand in mine, trembling. "The choice is yours, sweetheart," her mom said. Victoria stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. She grabbed the papers from the table and tore them in half, then in half again. Her mom's mouth fell open. Her dad's face went red. Victoria kept tearing until the pieces were confetti size. She let them fall like snow onto the expensive rug. Her mom started to say something, but Victoria was already walking out. I followed her. We got in her car, and she drove to my apartment without saying anything. Her hands were shaking on the steering wheel. When we got inside, she pulled out her phone and called her sister Natalie using my phone since her parents had already started blocking her number. She put it on speaker. The phone rang 4 times before Natalie picked up. Victoria's voice cracked when she said they were trying to get me expelled from school. There was a long pause on the other end. Then Natalie's voice came through, calm but serious, saying she'd help, but we needed to document everything. That night, Victoria couldn't sleep. She kept staring at my ceiling, tracing the water stains with her finger. Around 3 in the morning, she whispered that she'd never not had money. She didn't know how to be poor. I pulled her closer and told her we'd figure it out together. She cried into my shoulder until the sun came up. A week later, Marcus, who ran the auto shop where I worked weekends, called me into his office. He'd heard about what happened, small town and all. He offered me extra shifts, said I'd need the money now that I had a girl to take care of. Victoria insisted on coming with me to work. She wanted to learn. First day, she showed up in designer jeans and got oil all over them trying to help me change a filter. Her perfect nails broke one by one, but she kept working. Marcus watched her struggle with a wrench and nodded approval. 2 weeks into our new life, her parents showed up at our apartment. Mom was at her second job. I opened the door, and Richard pushed past me like he owned the place. Margaret followed, looking at our small living room like it might give her a disease. Victoria came out of the bedroom when she heard voices. Margaret looked at her daughter, who was wearing one of my old t-shirts and sweatpants, and her face twisted. She said this was beneath Victoria. Victoria didn't even blink. Richard moved closer to me, while Victoria was packing more of her things into a garbage bag since we didn't have suitcases. He spoke quietly, so Victoria wouldn't hear, promising to make my life hell. Every job I'd ever want, every opportunity, gone. He had connections everywhere in Seattle. Margaret added that they knew people at every college in the state. They'd make sure I never got in anywhere. Victoria came back with her bag and we left together. The next day, Natalie texted asking to meet at a coffee shop downtown. She slid a folder across the table when we sat down. Inside were bank statements, emails, documents. She explained that their dad had been hiding assets from the IRS for years. Their mom had been writing prescriptions for pills to her friends using fake names. Insurance if they decided to escalate. Victoria stared at the papers, then at her sister. Natalie just shrugged and said, family was complicated. complicated. 3 days later, Victoria got a job at the mall food court, Chinese place, minimum wage, plus tips. She came home that first night smelling like fried rice and sesame chicken, exhausted but proud. She pulled $43 in tips from her pocket and spread them on our kitchen table like treasure. It was the first money she'd ever earned herself. She counted it 3 times. We settled into a routine pretty fast. School, then work, then homework at my kitchen table. Victoria helped me with calculus since she was actually good at math. I helped her figure out budgeting, which was basically just not spending money we didn't have. Mom started bringing home leftover meals from the hospital cafeteria. Not fancy, but it kept us fed. Victoria learned to like meatloaf. 2 weeks after that, things at school got worse. The principal called us both in separately, then our teachers, then our friends. Someone had suggested I was grooming Victoria, taking advantage of her. The counselor, Mrs. Peterson, asked Victoria if she felt safe with me. Victoria's face went red. She stood up so fast her chair fell over. She told Mrs. Peterson that the only people she'd ever been unsafe with were her parents. Then she walked out, slamming the door so hard the certificates on the wall shook. Later we found out Mrs. Peterson was married to someone who worked at Richard's firm. Of course she was. The next day at the bus stop, Victoria grabbed my arm and pointed with her chin at a gray sedan parked across the street. The same car had been behind us when we left school. We took 3 different buses home that day, doubling back twice, and the sedan stayed with us until we ducked into a mall. My mom called me that night, her voice shaking. Margaret had shown up at the hospital where she worked, talking about how I was corrupting Victoria. Mom told her if she came near me again, she'd file harassment charges. Margaret just laughed and said we couldn't afford a lawyer anyway. Mom hung up on her. Victoria spent the next afternoon scrolling through old videos on her phone while we sat in my room. Every birthday party, every vacation, every Christmas morning, her parents were either on their phones or arguing in the background. She showed me one where her dad missed blowing out her candles because he was taking a work call. 3 weeks after the ultimatum, my manager at the auto shop pulled me aside. I wonder what Victoria's real plan is here, asking Dakota to fake date her for money when she clearly has other options. Something tells me this isn't just about getting her trust fund early. The way she grabbed his hand and her palm was sweaty makes me think she's more nervous than she's letting on about this whole arrangement. He couldn't give me any more hours, orders from above. The company that owned the chain had connections to Richard's firm. I went from 30 hours a week to 0. Victoria tried to give me money, but I couldn't take it. We were sitting in her car outside a coffee shop when Natalie called. Her voice came through the speaker fast and panicked. Victoria's parents were claiming she was mentally unstable and filing for conservatorship. If they got it, they'd control everything until she turned 21. Victoria dropped her phone and just stared at the dashboard. The next morning at school, the office called Victoria down during first period. A psychiatric evaluation request had been delivered, signed by a judge. She had 72 hours to comply, or they'd send police to bring her in. Natalie called it their nuclear option over the phone that afternoon. We spent hours at the library researching conservatorship laws on the computers. Victoria found an article about her cousin Emma, who'd dated someone the family didn't like 5 years ago. Same tactics, same lawyers, same result. Emma hadn't spoken to any of them since. The night before the evaluation, Victoria sat in my mom's car practicing what she'd say. She went over every possible question, trying to sound calm, but not rehearsed. Her hands shook so bad she had to sit on them. Mom made her tea and told her to just tell the truth. The evaluation was at a medical building downtown. Victoria's parents showed up with their own psychiatrist, a thin man with glasses who kept checking his watch. They'd brought a folder thick with papers, photos of Victoria at my apartment, statements about personality changes, claims she was rejecting family values. The neutral psychiatrist, a woman named Dr. Chen, took Victoria into a room alone. 2 hours passed. Victoria texted me from the bathroom once just to say the doctor was asking about us. I texted back to stay strong, but my hands were sweating so much I could barely type. 5 days dragged by while we waited for the report. Victoria couldn't eat anything her mom made, just pushed food around her plate at lunch. She'd lost so much weight her uniform hung loose on her shoulders. I watched her zone out in bio class, staring at nothing while the teacher explained cell division. Her mom kept making soup and leaving it outside Victoria's door, but it always went cold. The report finally came on a Friday afternoon. Victoria's hands shook as she opened the envelope in my apartment while her parents waited at their lawyer's office. Dr. Chen wrote that Victoria showed no signs of mental illness or undue influence. She was competent to make her own decisions. But there was a note at the bottom about family dysfunction requiring intervention. Victoria's parents filed an appeal within 2 hours. That weekend, Natalie showed up at my door with a USB drive. She'd been recording their conversations for weeks, using her phone hidden in her purse. The recordings had everything. Her parents discussing bribes to school board members. Her mom admitting she'd been accessing Victoria's medical records through a friend at the hospital. Natalie's face looked pale as she handed over the drive. Victoria hugged her sister so hard I thought she might break. We took everything to legal aid on Monday morning. The lawyer looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, files stacked everywhere. She listened to the recordings and read through our documents. She said we had a case, but warned us Victoria's parents had unlimited money for lawyers. This could drag on for years. 6 weeks passed in a blur of court filings and meetings. Marcus's cousin worked as a paralegal downtown and spent his lunch breaks researching trust fund law. He found something buried in the original documents. If the trustees acted against the beneficiary's best interests, control could transfer to an independent party. We had proof now with Natalie's recordings, but Victoria's parents struck back hard. They filed for a restraining order claiming I was dangerous and manipulating their daughter. The judge granted it without even hearing our side. 500 feet minimum distance at all times. We couldn't eat lunch together anymore. Had to take different routes between classes. The security guard followed me around making sure I stayed away. Victoria started recording everything on her phone after that. Every conversation with her parents, every threat they made, every time they tried to control her. She uploaded it all to cloud storage they didn't know existed, building evidence for whatever came next. My acceptance letters arrived in April. Full ride to UW for engineering. I'd worked so hard for that scholarship. The next morning, I got a call from the financial aid office. My scholarship was under review due to character concerns. They'd received troubling information about my conduct. Victoria's parents had reached the admissions board somehow. somehow. Natalie let us use her apartment to meet since we couldn't be seen together. She lived in this tiny studio near campus, barely room for all three of us. She kept apologizing to Victoria, saying she should have stood up to their parents years ago. Victoria just held her sister's hand and said it wasn't her fault. 2 months after the ultimatum, the school board scheduled my expulsion hearing. Victoria's parents hired 3 lawyers who showed up in matching suits. Our legal aid attorney arrived 20 minutes late with coffee stains on her shirt. The board members already looked convinced before anyone spoke. Victoria sat in the back row taking notes on everything. Her parents sat in front like they owned the place. The hearing room door slammed open and everyone turned to look. Natalie walked in, pulling a metal cart stacked with banker boxes, her heels clicking on the floor. She wheeled it right up to the board's table and started pulling out folders, spreading them across the wood surface. The board members leaned back in their chairs. Some of them went pale. Victoria's mom stood up so fast her chair tipped backward. Her dad's face turned red like he might explode. Natalie grabbed one folder and held it up. Evidence of my parents' bribery attempts. Her voice carried through the whole room. She opened another box and pulled out more papers, bank statements, emails, recorded conversations on USB drives. The board president picked up one document and his hands started shaking. 2 board members whispered to each other and kept looking at Victoria's parents. The school's lawyer grabbed his phone and started typing fast. Victoria squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. Her parents' lawyers huddled together talking in low voices. One of them walked over to the board president and they had a quick conversation. The president stood up and cleared his throat. The hearing would be postponed indefinitely pending review of new evidence. People started getting up and moving toward the doors. Outside in the hallway, Richard grabbed Natalie's arm hard enough to leave marks. "You're dead to this family." His voice was quiet, but scary. Natalie pulled her arm free and rubbed where he'd grabbed her. "I've been dead to this family for years." She walked away without looking back. Victoria's mom stood there crying angry tears while their lawyers tried to calm her down. We drove back to my apartment in silence. Mom had made spaghetti with the cheap sauce from the dollar store. We sat around our tiny kitchen table eating off mismatched plates. Victoria smiled for the first time in weeks, twirling pasta on her fork. We're winning, but we all knew it wasn't over, not even close. The next morning, Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from her bank. Her trust fund access had been frozen. Natalie called an hour later. Hers was frozen too. She showed up at our door that afternoon with 2 suitcases and a laptop bag. Our 1-bedroom apartment already felt small with 3 people. Now we had 4. Mom gave up her bed without complaining and started sleeping on the couch. Natalie took the floor in the living room with some blankets we got from Goodwill. We made it work because we had to. 10 weeks after the ultimatum, Victoria started getting sick. She'd wake up with headaches so bad she couldn't open her eyes. Food wouldn't stay down. She lost 15 pounds in 2 weeks. The free clinic doctor checked her over and asked about stress in her life. Victoria almost laughed at that question. The doctor said it was anxiety manifesting physically. "You need to find ways to manage this." She gave us some pamphlets about breathing exercises and meditation. Victoria threw them away on the walk home. That's when Natalie had an idea. We started posting about everything online. Reddit first, then TikTok, Twitter, everywhere we could think of. The story of rich parents controlling their kids with money. Screenshots of the legal documents Natalie had saved. Our posts started getting thousands of views, then tens of thousands. People shared their own stories in the comments. Kids cut off for dating the wrong person, for choosing the wrong career, for being gay. The support messages poured in. Some people even sent money through Venmo to help with groceries. Victoria's parents found out about the posts within days. Their lawyer sent a cease and desist letter. Then they filed an actual lawsuit for defamation. They wanted everything deleted plus damages for harm to their reputation. Our legal aid lawyer looked at the paperwork and shook her head. We needed real representation or we'd lose everything. That night I held Victoria while she cried. She kept saying she should just give up, take their money, let me have a normal life. I'm not worth this. She tried to push me away, but I wouldn't let go. We fought for the first time, really fought. She threw a glass against the wall. I punched a hole in the bathroom door. Mom and Natalie sat in the kitchen pretending not to hear us screaming at each other. Victoria's parents just played their whole deck of dirty tricks, like they're running for office against their own daughter. Job sabotage, psychiatric evaluations, restraining orders, the works. The next morning, a lawyer called. She'd seen our story online and wanted to help pro bono. I specialize in trust fund abuse cases. She'd taken down families like Victoria's before. We met her at a coffee shop downtown. She looked through all of Natalie's evidence and smiled. 3 months after the ultimatum, she filed our countersuit. Breach of fiduciary duty, intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraud, the list went on. She included Natalie's recordings as evidence. The recordings where Victoria's parents discussed bribing school board members, where they talked about destroying my future to control their daughter, where they laughed about how easy it would be to ruin a poor kid's life. Their lawyer's face went white when he saw what we had. The next morning, a reporter called my phone asking for a comment about the lawsuit. Someone had leaked the whole story to Channel 7. By noon, the headline was everywhere online. Pharmaceutical heiress parents try to buy off daughter's boyfriend. Richard's company stock dropped 2 whole points before the market closed. Victoria showed me the calendar she'd been keeping in her apartment. Every single day crossed off with red marker. 5 months until her birthday. 5 months felt like years when you're counting every hour. Margaret showed up at the hospital 3 days later while my mom was working her shift. Started screaming in the middle of the emergency room about how my mom would never work in this city again. Security dragged her out while patients filmed everything on their phones. Mom's supervisor pulled her aside after and told her not to worry. The hospital had dealt with rich bullies before. Our lawyer called that afternoon with news that changed everything. He'd been digging through old documents and found something huge. Victoria's trust wasn't set up by her parents at all. Her grandmother had created it 20 years ago. The old woman had put in all these rules to stop her daughter Margaret from controlling the money. Victoria got promoted to shift supervisor at the food court job she'd been working. 14 weeks of showing up on time and working hard had paid off. She framed her first supervisor paycheck and hung it on her apartment wall. Then James Whitmore showed up at our lawyer's office with 3 boxes of documents. The man who'd been the family lawyer for 20 years had switched sides. He sat across from Victoria and told her that her parents had crossed every line. Her grandmother would be disgusted by what they were doing. The documents he brought showed everything. Victoria's grandmother had suspected Margaret would try to control the money someday. She'd hidden a special rule in the trust papers. If the parents ever acted maliciously to control Victoria, she could go to court and get the money at any age. Richard and Margaret fired James the next day and threatened to destroy his whole career. James didn't care. He told them he knew where all their dirty secrets were buried after 20 years. We filed the emergency request at the courthouse 2 weeks later. The judge read through all our evidence about the harassment and control. She looked at Victoria and said, no parent should use money as a weapon against their own child. Meanwhile, Natalie was texting Victoria updates from inside the house. 4 months after that first ultimatum, her parents were sleeping in separate bedrooms. Margaret blamed Richard for losing control of the situation. Richard blamed Margaret for making everything worse. Their perfect marriage was falling apart. The nights got worse for Victoria after that. She'd wake up shaking at 2 or 3 in the morning, her whole body covered in sweat, grabbing for me like I might disappear. Same dream every time. Her parents winning, dragging her back to that house, me vanishing like I never existed. I'd hold her until her breathing slowed down, feeling her heart pound against my chest, whispering that we were almost there, almost free. The court date came faster than we expected. 3 weeks of prep turned into walking through metal detectors at 9 in the morning. Victoria's parents showed up with 5 lawyers in matching suits, carrying briefcases that probably cost more than my car. We had our pro bono attorney Sarah and James with his stack of evidence folders. The judge had already read everything we submitted, every threat, every recording, every piece of paper showing how they tried to destroy my life, to control their daughter. Margaret went first on the stand. She sat there in her designer dress talking about protecting Victoria from gold diggers and opportunists. The judge cut her off mid-sentence, asking why she offered me money to leave if I was supposedly after money. Margaret's mouth opened and closed like a fish. No words came out. Then she started crying, but it looked fake, like she was squeezing her eyes to make tears happen. Richard took the stand next. Under oath, he admitted everything. The private investigator following me, the calls to my mom's boss trying to get her fired, the letters to every college I applied to saying I was unstable and dangerous. He kept saying he was protecting his family, but the judge's face got harder with every word. When Victoria took the stand, the whole courtroom went quiet. She pulled out her phone and played recording after recording. Her parents discussing how to break us up, how to break her, planning to cut off her college funds if she didn't obey, talking about sending her to some camp in Utah for troubled teens. Her voice stayed steady, but tears ran down her face the whole time. Then it was my turn. Sarah asked me simple questions. When did I fall in love with Victoria? Before I knew about the money. Why did I agree to fake date her? Because she seemed desperate and I needed the cash. When did it become real? The second week when she held my hand and it felt right. Victoria was crying harder now. The judge took a week to decide. 7 days of Victoria barely sleeping, checking her phone every 5 minutes, jumping every time it rang. Then Sarah called. We won. Everything. Victoria got immediate access to her trust fund. Her parents lost all control. They also had to pay our legal fees plus damages for harassment. Outside the courthouse, Margaret and Richard waited by their car. Margaret reached for Victoria's arm, but Victoria stepped back. Her mother said they were still her parents. That blood meant something. Victoria looked at them for a long moment. Then she said, parents don't do what they did. They were just people she used to know. We went back to my apartment where Mom had mac and cheese waiting. Victoria sat at our scratched kitchen table holding the bank papers. $8 million in her name. She kept staring at the numbers like they might change. Mom added extra cheese to Victoria's bowl and rubbed her shoulder. That night, Victoria couldn't sleep again, but for different reasons. She pressed against me in my twin bed, asking, what if the money changed us? What if we turned into them? Cold and controlling and cruel. I reminded her she was the girl who learned to change oil in my driveway, who ate $1 menu burgers without complaining, who chose love over money when her parents gave her that ultimatum. The money was just numbers. She was still her. 2 weeks passed in this weird blur of normal life mixed with crazy money stuff. Victoria spent 3 days straight on her laptop, setting up paperwork for something she wouldn't tell me about until she dragged me to this lawyer's office downtown, where she signed papers creating the Phoenix Foundation for teens escaping controlling families. She pushed the check across the desk. $1 million. The lawyer's hand shook, taking it. Victoria just shrugged and said others needed what we had, help and hope. That same afternoon, her dad's company board called an emergency meeting that lasted 6 hours. The news broke the next morning. Richard's resignation effective immediately. Stock price dropped 12% in an hour. Margaret's medical license review started 3 days later after someone leaked those recordings to the medical board. Their whole empire built on control, and connections started falling apart piece by piece. Victoria found an apartment near UW the following week. Nothing fancy, she kept saying while signing the lease on a 2-bedroom place with a view of the water. She still went to her food court job every morning at 6. Her manager asked if she was crazy now that she had money. She just said she liked earning her own money too. Made her feel real. Natalie called crying when her trust fund got restored. The judge ruled her parents had no grounds to freeze it after everything came out. She used her first payment to rent an office space and file paperwork for her own law firm, specializing in financial abuse cases. She hugged Victoria so hard I thought ribs might crack. You inspired me, she said over and over. My scholarship letter came exactly 1 month after court, mysteriously reapproved with full funding. No explanation needed. The school's biggest donors weren't donors anymore. Their influence gone along with their reputation. I could actually go to college without drowning in debt or working 3 jobs. Mom cried when I showed her. Victoria started seeing a therapist twice a week. Dr. Chen's office was small and plain. Nothing like the fancy psychiatrists her parents had sent her to as a kid. This one actually listened. Victoria came out of sessions exhausted. She'd sit in my car afterward staring at nothing. I need to understand why I normalized their behavior for so long, she said once. Healing wasn't instant even with money. Then Margaret showed up. 4 weeks after court, 2 in the morning, pounding on our apartment door so hard the neighbors called security. She was drunk, mascara running down her face, designer dress torn at the shoulder. You destroyed everything, she screamed when Victoria cracked the door open with the chain still on. Margaret showing up drunk at 2 in the morning with torn clothes feels like a pretty low point for someone who used to control everything. Makes me wonder if she really believes Victoria destroyed things or if she knows deep down that she did this to herself. You ungrateful little bitch, you you destroyed our whole lives. Victoria's hands stayed steady as she called 911. Margaret tried forcing the door. Security got there first, then the cops. They arrested her for violating the restraining order, public intoxication, attempted breaking and entering. The whole building watched from their doorways. Richard filed for divorce 2 days later. His lawyer's statement blamed Margaret for losing Victoria, for destroying their reputation, for the company collapse. The family that looked perfect from outside finally showed everyone the rot inside. We drove 3 hours to find the cemetery. Victoria hadn't been there since she was 7. Her grandmother's headstone was simple, just a name and dates. Victoria knelt in the wet grass, not caring about her genes. "Thank you for protecting me," she said to the stone. Even from beyond. She left flowers, white roses, her grandmother's favorite, according to the journal. 6 weeks after court, we had something like normal life. Sunday dinners at Mom's apartment with Natalie there too. Victoria tutoring kids at the community center on Tuesdays. Me actually keeping up with college work instead of falling behind from exhaustion. We grocery shopped like regular people, paid bills, did laundry. Normal life, just without the constant fear of not having enough money for food or rent. The news about Victoria's parents came through Natalie during one of our Sunday dinners. She'd been checking court records for her own case stuff when she spotted their names on the divorce filing. Richard filed first, but Margaret counterfiled the same day with accusations about hidden accounts and affairs. Within a week, their lawyers were throwing around words like fraud and embezzlement in public documents anyone could read online. Victoria scrolled through the court website on her phone while we ate Mom's lasagna. Her face stayed blank, but her hand gripped mine under the table. The divorce turned into a full war by the second week, with both of them trying to grab as much money as possible before the other could hide it. They were so busy fighting each other that Victoria's phone stopped ringing completely. No more threats or bribes or demands to come home. She looked at the silent phone one night and said those 5 words about it being the best gift they ever gave her. Then her old friends started showing up. First was Ashley from her private school, who sent a long text about how sorry she was for not standing by Victoria when everything went down. Victoria read it 3 times before deciding to meet her for coffee. Ashley cried and apologized for 20 minutes straight, while Victoria just listened. Then came Madison and Sophia together at the community center where Victoria tutored. They watched her helping kids with homework for an hour before working up the courage to approach. Madison said they'd been scared of Victoria's parents and what they might do if anyone stayed friends with her. Sophia just kept saying sorry over and over. Victoria forgave them, but when Brittany showed up at our apartment with expensive flowers and a sob story about peer pressure, Victoria didn't even let her pass the doorway. She took one look at the girl who'd spread the worst rumors and closed the door in her face. I heard later that Brittany told everyone Victoria was stuck up now, but Victoria didn't care anymore about what those people thought. Marcus called me into his office at the shop on a Thursday afternoon. His boss was there too, which made my stomach drop until I saw them both smiling. The boss handed Marcus a new name tag that said manager and shook his hand while explaining that having Victoria work there had brought in 30 new customers just from people wanting to see the rich girl who chose to change oil. Marcus got a raise and a bonus, and the first thing he did was give everyone an extra day off with pay. 2 months after the court case ended, Victoria's foundation had enough money to help its first family, a kid named Tyler whose parents kicked him out for being gay. He'd been sleeping in his car and working 2 jobs trying to save for college. Victoria met with him personally and set him up with an apartment and full tuition for community college. She came home that night with tears on her face, saying those words about it making everything worth it. Graduation day came in June with the football field set up with white chairs and a stage. Victoria walked across to get her diploma, and I watched her eyes scan the crowd once before looking away. Her parents' seats stayed empty, but Mom was there cheering louder than anyone, and Natalie brought a sign that said, "That's my sister," even though they weren't related by blood. After the ceremony, Victoria hugged them both and said the thing about having her real family there. 2 weeks later, Victoria showed up at my place with car keys to a used Honda Civic she'd bought with money from selling jewelry her parents had given her. She'd mapped out a whole road trip route through Oregon and Northern California with stops at regular motels and diners. No 5-star hotels or restaurants that required reservations. She specifically said no Mercedes, because that was never really her. We drove for 2 weeks eating at truck stops and sleeping in places where the walls were thin enough to hear the TV next door. She was happier than I'd ever seen her. We stopped at this small restaurant in Eureka for lunch when I saw him first. Richard sat alone at a corner table with coffee and nothing else. His hair had gone gray at the temples, and his face had lines that weren't there 6 months ago. He saw us at the same moment and stood up slowly, like his bones hurt. He walked over and said those 2 words about being sorry. Victoria looked at him for maybe 10 seconds, really looked at him like she was memorizing what he'd become. Then she turned and walked past him toward our table without saying anything. He stood there for another minute before leaving cash on his table and walking out. Mom called that night with news about her promotion to head nurse. She'd been passed over 3 times before, but this time she'd fought for it and won. She told Victoria on speakerphone that seeing her stand up to her parents had inspired her to stand up for herself at work. Victoria cried happy tears, while Mom explained how she demanded the promotion and threatened to take her 20 years of experience to another hospital if they passed her over again. 3 months after court, Natalie's evidence about the offshore accounts finally triggered something at the IRS. Federal agents showed up at both Richard and Margaret's new separate homes with warrants and boxes of documents. The investigation found millions in hidden money they'd never paid taxes on, going back 15 years. The penalties and back taxes meant they'd have to sell everything just to avoid federal prison. The news made the business section of the paper with their photos looking like mugshots. Victoria read the article once, then threw the paper away without commenting. September came, and we packed up for UW together. Victoria had picked social work as her major after working at the community center all summer. She filled out the forms where they ask why you chose your major and wrote a single line about wanting to help kids escape families like hers. 2 weeks into fall semester, a thick envelope showed up at our apartment with Margaret's handwriting on it. Victoria opened it and found pages of her mom's neat script talking about forgiveness and family bonds and how they just wanted what was best for her. She read maybe 3 lines before walking to the kitchen sink and burning the whole thing with my lighter. lighter. The smoke detector went off, but she didn't move until every page turned to ash. October marked 1 year since that dinner where her parents made their offer, and we went back to the same fancy restaurant to celebrate. Victoria ordered the cheapest thing on the menu just like I did that first night, and when the waiter brought our food, she grabbed my hand across the table. Her foundation had grown faster than anyone expected, with James working as legal counsel after everything that happened with his own family. He called it his redemption, helping other kids escape the same trap, and together, they'd already gotten 17 teens out of bad situations. Natalie joined them 4 months after the court stuff wrapped up and won her first case helping a girl whose parents were using her college fund as leverage. The girl cried in Natalie's office afterward, and Natalie called Victoria immediately to say thanks for showing everyone it was possible. Then the news broke in January that really ended everything. Richard got arrested for tax evasion on some offshore accounts, and the investigation uncovered years of fraud at his company. Margaret's medical license got pulled when they found out she'd been writing fake prescriptions for rich clients on the side. Their whole empire just collapsed in a matter of weeks. Victoria found out from a reporter who called asking for comment, and she just said no thanks and hung up. March brought a conference invitation where they wanted Victoria to speak about financial abuse in families. She stood in front of 200 people and talked about how money isn't love and control isn't care, and sometimes the people with the least money have the most of what actually matters. The crowd gave her a standing ovation, but she just looked uncomfortable with all the attention. Most nights we just studied in our tiny apartment near campus, with Victoria making ramen while I wrote essays for my engineering classes. One time she caught me staring and asked what was wrong, and I reminded her about when she couldn't believe she'd have to live like this. She just laughed and said this was better than any mansion. Her 18th birthday came in April with no big party or fancy dinner, just Mom and Natalie and Marcus eating grocery store cake in our living room while Victoria opened cards they'd made by hand. Richard going gray and saying sorry in that tiny restaurant feels like watching someone finally realize they bet their whole life on the wrong cards and lost everything, including their daughter. She raised her plastic cup of soda and called them her real family, and everyone got quiet for a second before Mom started crying happy tears. Late that night, after everyone left, Victoria pulled up her bank account on her laptop and showed me the balance. She'd donated half her trust fund to different charities for abuse victims and foster kids and legal aid programs. The number left was still huge, but she shrugged and said it was more than we'd ever need anyway. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight coming through our cheap blinds and Victoria making coffee in my old t-shirt that went down to her knees. She was humming some song completely off key while measuring grounds, and when she saw me watching, she smiled that same smile from when this all started, except now it was real. I got up to make eggs and bacon while she finished the coffee, and we moved around each other in the tiny kitchen like we'd been doing it forever. She said I love you the same casual way she'd been saying it every morning since the trial ended, and I pulled her close enough to smell her shampoo. I said it back and meant it more than I'd ever meant anything. Outside our window, Seattle was waking up with traffic sounds and people heading to work. We had classes in an hour and shifts at our jobs after that. Just a normal Tuesday in our normal life with normal problems like rent and homework and what to make for dinner. Exactly what we'd fought for all those months ago when Victoria walked into my life with $500 and a crazy plan. Exactly what her parents never thought we'd actually choose. Exactly perfect. Well, folks, that's it for me today. Thanks for letting me wonder about all this with you. Definitely been interesting sharing these thoughts together. Like the video, it helps more than you think.